Really excited to be here today. I just want to, I'll be very brief because we have like a really good lecture about thinking about product and games that Steven's going to present. Just to give a little context on us, like we're both Stanford alums. We graduated here a couple years, maybe more than a couple years ago. And when we were here, we never had the opportunity to take a video games class. We were really passionate about it. We wanted to learn more, but it was very hard to figure out how to do that and in what ways to get involved. So we had this idea several years ago to be like, we really want to bring this to campus and see what the response would be. For some of you who love video games, this might be the class you've been waiting for a long time. Like this like sings to your heart and you're very excited about it. For others of you, maybe you're interested because it's like an academic pursuit or you want to know how to build great products. I hope that you'll find that this is really applicable wherever you take this course into your future, because many of you probably will not join the games industry, but you'll do something for people. And building games is about fundamentally understanding people and psychology. And it's about taking your tech and finding really great ways to make it for people. That's ultimately what we're trying to do. And so look at this class from a couple different lenses. I want to introduce Steven. So we've worked together for about 9 years at different places. Steven is started off in traditional tech in Silicon Valley and then followed his dream to go into games. He was a gameplay programmer for Ratchet & Clank. How many of you guys played Ratchet & Clank? Oh, there's a lot of people who played Ratchet & Clank. Built a bunch of the weapons. And then went into the production track where he worked at EA. He helped produce Spore, has also helped produce Project Titan, which was a research project at Blizzard, also League of Legends, and is now the lead producer for an upcoming game title from Riot Games. So I'll give you guys Slim.
All right, so as Tom says, the main reason why we're here is to do our little part to try to improve the products that are being hopefully generated, some of the best products that come out of the next generations of Stanford students. As he said, when we were kind of coming through here, probably this is still largely true today, everything's kind of optimized for like Silicon Valley, right? And many of you are computer science majors or econ majors or psych majors, and it's really easy to get caught up in kind of what you're doing day to day. Is your parents just mortgage a house to get you through Stanford, so go and get a good job, right? And so it's really easy to kind of get caught up in landing a good job, and more or less a lot of you, half the room is probably going to land up at Google, Facebook, Palantir, you name it. And we just felt that there's more out there in the world. And I wish at the time that I was here, and I wish for the 10 years following, that someone was there to tell me that there was a bigger world out there. At the time, I've always been a gamer. I think while at Stanford, probably shouldn't admit this out loud, but I played probably over 7,000 hours of Counter-Strike, 1.6. So that's what I was doing. But so I wanted to make games. I knew I wanted to make games since I was in 5th grade, but I had no idea how to make that leap. I didn't know anyone in the industry. At the time, there was probably under 5 Stanford grads in the game industry. Now there's a lot more. And I just want to take a lot of what we learned in the past 15 years and then hopefully give you guys some shortcuts. Teach you guys some things that, or at least plant some seeds in your mind so that you can have these things rattling around to guide you as you make your own decisions in your own career. With regard to CS146, there's a precious 9 weeks that you guys have. This is up significantly from the precious 3 weeks or 2 or 3 weeks that we had in CS248, where students would have a chance to build a game. And we've been chopping this tree for 4 years to try to get this class to happen. And finally, we have this chance to have a full 3 months to make a game. Don't squander this. In this 9 weeks, it might seem like a lot of time, but you're going to be confronted with hundreds of decisions. If you don't have something to guide you along the way, there's going to be a lot of wasted effort, and that 9 weeks is going to be a lot shorter than it could be. Also, your sense of what makes a good or bad product, developing your taste. These are all things that take years. Years of playing games, years of watching movies, years of reading, years of talking and arguing with people, and something that needs to be exercised as a muscle to be built. Again, I want to thank everyone involved in this. It was a tremendous amount of effort. It was just about 5 or 6 years ago that Tom and I sat meekly in FedKey's office while he kind of like asked us what we were up to, but here we are. I won't bother with the details here, but the general thing that I had to go through was, I went through again. I kind of did what I was supposed to do. I got a job. I programmed. I did the tasks that my manager would ask me to do. Every place I was at, professed to like be working on something that would like change the world, right? I'm sure a lot of you watch Silicon Valley, the show. It's totally like that out there, okay? People totally are like digging these niche little businesses that are like, yeah, we're going to change the world with this because, they don't have anything really. They're not really solving a problem that people care about, right? So they have to go to these like grandiose things, right? Like we don't need another chat app in this universe anymore. So along this way, I saw a lot of, basically I wasted a lot of time. I worked on a lot of products that had no demand, that didn't really have a distinct customer in mind. And so therefore, it was just a matter of time before they became obsolete or useless. I worked on a lot of things that didn't end up shipping. And hopefully I can save you guys a lot of time. I'm going to talk about a couple concepts just before I get started on the product design aspect. And again, I'm going to go really broadly, just so you have some things in mind when the other speakers go more deeply on topics. The first and foremost thing, if you black out and walk away with nothing else, is this concept of focus. The general idea is you want to be remembered for something good, then nothing at all, or shove a bunch of features into your product that don't actually add up to anything. This is going to be very useful as your guiding like North Star. Again, for the hundreds and thousands of decisions to come, if you keep your eyes trained on the outcome you desire, then each of those decisions will gradually channel you to your destination. If you don't have this in mind, you're just going to scatter. And this is a very obvious concept when said out loud, and you'd be shocked at how few companies do this at all, let alone do it well. I like this as an exercise. So as you're thinking about what it is you and your group want to commit to, try to practice a very concise pitch. This is going to force you to make hard decisions and to really distill down what your game or experience is all about, or your product. If you find yourself throwing a lot of words, listing a lot of bullet points, trying to convince the person in front of you to try your product or to play your game, you've already lost, I think. And so if you can get it to be really simple, there's so many things that happen. First of all of you will be better aligned. The value is in the exercise. So as you're debating like the nuances of would someone take away this meaning or that meaning, you're really going to understand kind of the edges and borders of each of your preferences and understanding as this group, right? For a lot of you, this will be the first group you meaningfully work in. Also, at the end of the day, whoever you put your product or your game in front of, they're going to do this. Whoever else is looking at their product looking at your experience over your shoulder, they're going to just walk away with a pithy like statement, just like a little, oh, this is digital Legos, or this is a competitive game. They're going to shorthand it. Think about, I'll get this a little bit more into this later, but think about what you want them to say when they say that. And this is going to be applicable to anything. Once you have your concise pitch, you're going to be better able to kind of buy your next few minutes or your first meeting or your first call with someone with a potential job, with a VC, with your professor, like with your peers. Like this is going to be infinitely applicable. Just remember that you guys is a room full of smart people. You're going to have thought about your product way more than the person standing in front of you, right? And even if they're a smart person, they're just going to have captured just the very surface level of all the thought that you've put into this. So make sure what you put in front of them actually resonates. These are some of the projects from the CS248 class from, I think, 2016. And this is like pretty decent, right? Like this is, again, keep in mind it's a 3-week class, the 3-week project. But this was an exercise that I asked each of the projects to do, and they would kind of, list or at least describe their product in a short statement. And you can kind of see the range here, right? There's VR projects, there's 2D games, there's mobile games, there's console games, there's all kinds of stuff in here. Okay, so getting to product design. To me, product design is synonymous with the choices you make. What goes into your product and what stays out? Every single decision you make there is absolutely critical. It is, again, very tempting to just shove more stuff in there as a stack of Band-Aids start to form, right? And that's not necessarily what makes something good. There's so much to product design that I could not possibly cover today, but I'll suggest breaking it up into two primary areas. One is a thoughtful exercise around the opportunity. And the other is how you execute against that strategy and that opportunity. And I'll go into each of these a little bit more. So let's rewind back about 10 years, okay? I know we're supposed to talk about games, but for a lot of you who are also interested in product. 10 years ago I think 2006 is when the first iPhone came out. At the time, phones looked like this. These were, I think, the major offerings. And it may not be exactly right, but it's Google Images. So it's like right around there. So if you think about like the key need that was being served, it's just the ability to communicate, right? That's what started the phone. That's what solved a lot of problems. But probably nobody in this room remembers that phones used to be plugged into walls. And so a big value add with mobile phones, I started out with kind of mobile handsets locally within a house, was to be untethered. I want to be able to communicate, and I want to be in the kitchen, I want to be in the living room, I want to be sitting on the couch or whatever. And then that just expanded to I want to be anywhere. I want to be in my car and anywhere. And so the first offering was kind of like a phone. It was a phone that was uncorded, had a battery pack that could last it a reasonable amount of time, and I could communicate by voice. As this evolved, you're like, okay, again, these Nokia phones, I don't know if anyone remembers, there used to be like bricks, right? And you could kind of like shield yourself from a nuclear blast with one of these things. So they kind of went smaller, and Motorola made the StarTAC, and then StarTAC evolved, and that was like something that you could fit inside your pocket comfortably without sitting on a brick or looking like you have a brick in your pocket. And then people wanted more functions. Like I want to be able to email, I want to be able to message, I want to be able to check my calendar. And these micro features started stacking on top. Eventually, this led to the thought like, it's basically a computer. It's a small computer. I can do a lot of this stuff, including calling, at around 2006 on my computer. The computer, even with laptops, were kind of big, certainly couldn't fit in your pocket. And then this highlighted an opportunity that Apple figured out. So they abstracted it all the way back to the beginning. They're like, what is our base need? Phones had evolved up to that point. If they had competed like everyone else was competing, they would have ended up with the BlackBerry. You can kind of tell how the BlackBerry is an evolution of micro additions to different functions, one by one, that people wanted. So they were looking at what people needed, but they're looking at it at a really micro level, and then they were looking at it probably like 20 at a time, and they just started stacking, right? So the BlackBerry looks like that. There's just pieces, a lot of little pieces. It literally looks like that. But if you rewind the camera all the way back, or you pull the camera all the way back to, this is a computer that I wish I could fit in my pocket, that, I would argue, I'd posit, was the fundamental need being scratched by the iPhone. The iPhone can do a lot of the things, or does most of the same things that the BlackBerry did at the time. And since each product has evolved and BlackBerry evolved into death, but the iPhone is basically that, right? They basically took away keyboards. They kind of just made the whole experience better. And I would say that they did something more than that. They took good product decisions and then they executed really well, and at the end of the day, they hit an emotional resonance. So when Steve Jobs is up on stage, he's not listing a million features. He's just going, isn't this cool? That's about all he has to do. And all the fanboys come out and start drooling, and then they're a $1 trillion company. So, but this is what you're witnessing is the upper echelon of excellent product design. You know, when you get that emotional response, that emotion speaks way louder than any list of bullet points that you can put in front of someone. This is what phones look like today. I'm PC Master Race guy, so I have to just highlight, like, you know, the Android phone, which I think in some ways is out-appling Apple. Like, this is the latest iPhone X, right? And they're just starting to do some questionable things, right? That notch on top, I'm sure there's like going to be some useful functions that will blow people's minds at some point. But right now, you're just like, dude, what's a video going to look like with this notch in it, right? Also, they're taking a lot of flack right now for the Face ID thing, right? That, you know, I'm not an expert here, not an iPhone user, but like, I'm like, who was asking for this? Did they put that in because that's something they could do, or something that helped something get better, right? Does it help you log in any easier? No, like fingerprint readers these days are really fast, right? So why? So speaking of one-upping Apple, Microsoft. This was a typical Microsoft. This is typical Microsoft packaging from like the 90s or the 2000s. They just throw a bunch of words at you, features and numbers and stuff, and like literally nobody reads this. And then they expect you to be like, oh, this product's awesome, right? They're not talking about really like they don't really show you why this is going to make your life any better. Fast forward 10 years to now, and this video is a little long. This was the Microsoft Surface Studio that was announced almost exactly 1 year ago. Look at Microsoft's pivot in how they approach conveying to you why you might want this. And I'll show you the counter video in a second, just a little bit of that. That's not right, sorry. I'm a nerd, so this is like porn for me. I'm just like, look at this beautiful like lighting change in the back. It's beautiful, this thing. I've literally watched this video like 30 times. She's literally making like scribbling look sexy. to contrast this. I wasn't going to show this video, but I just have to show you the first 30 seconds. Now, I don't know what mastermind troll pulled this off, but 2 days later, the MacBook Pro was announced, okay? Like, I am just so impressed because I just admire whoever managed to make Apple look a fool like this. This is like crazy. Oh. I'll just show you like a minute of this.
The new MacBook Pro combines the fundamental qualities of an ultra-portable device with uncompromised performance. With a new design, the product's overall volume has been reduced dramatically. This results in an extremely purposeful and powerful creative tool. It has the best Retina display we've ever put in a notebook.
That's about enough. But this is 2 days later. The amount of downvotes on this video is like incredible. And what universe am I in where Apple, the company that is known most over anyone for design, like when we go from Steve Jobs being able to just hold up a phone and say, "Isn't this cool?" to Johnny Ive, the god of design, spouting features at you. What planet am I on? This is like last year, right? So, let's get to the opportunity. I suggest, the biggest suggestion I can make here is, the number one question that you should ask yourself is, why in the world should this product exist? Don't just do it because, you can, or you just don't know what else to do. I guess doing something is better than nothing, but you should ask why anyone would bother. Like one of the initial questions that we asked ourselves when we started to get involved in the class was, we'd see these amazing tech demos coming out of CS248, right? But they're things that people had done before ad nauseum, like cloth sim on a cape, or certain things that are really, really technical, right? But nobody is going to bother downloading that. No one is even going to bother with the 15 seconds it takes to click that thing and look at your video. They just won't bother. The better your answer to this question, the more you'll be onto something. And if you can't answer that question, well, that's just look at 99% of startups out there. Like a lot of people think, yeah, it is hard to do a startup. And people think, yeah, like most startups fail. But they fail because of really bad decisions that could have been prevented or could have been thought about. This question breaks down into a few more. Who's it for? Start off with that. Picture someone, even if it's yourself, a problem you have. What is it you want? What problem do you have? What problem can be solved? What would excite you? And then what could you possibly do in a matter of 3 weeks, 3 months, whatever it is, to do anything about that? I'll use Tesla as another example. So Tesla's mission is to accelerate the world's transition to sustainable energy. That's like on their website or something. And I think they had changed this once in their history to this. So why does anyone care about this? And I believe Elon Musk has said this more than once, but it's something along the lines that humanity on Earth is doomed because our rate of consumption far outpaces like what the Earth can sustain, or at least the humans are doomed, right? The Earth will be fine. Who's it for, right? At least right now, I don't know if this will be forever. I'll kind of shorthand it to be like, I'm trying to think of words that aren't that mean, but okay, those are enlightened humans who want to save the world. Look at these people's faces, right? They're excited, right? Their product, the Tesla Model X with its insanity mode, like appeals to the emotion. There's a reason why they chose the name of that, right? They got to call it anything. They reference Spaceballs, the movie. Like they're trying to just call it what it is. Like the reaction on people's faces, that's what they're describing. And also people, who have money burning in their pocket, who want to buy a nice car but don't want to just, get a cliche sports car, can look like they're buying this cool tech tool that is actually pretty damn cool and is actually eventually may start the foundation of actually changing some things in how our world operates. And in fact, you can just see the effect that Tesla has had on every other automaker. BMW sales are down, of the 3 Series, their primary product, are down 40% this year alone. I think Volvo, their entire lineup is going to switch to electric by 2022, I think. Audi is introducing a new all-electric vehicle, brand new, freshly designed all-electric vehicle every year for the next 3 years. And part of that's because they got, that's part of their reparations for their scandal. But Tesla is changing the world, right? Toyota's CEO really spoke kind words of admiration for Elon and what he's done. This is part of a glimpse into Tesla's strategy. So this is a little bit abstracted from one product, but into many products. So I'll just do this only for one slide. If you look at their entire product lineup that they're starting to talk about, starting to expose, starting to announce, they all are part of this master plan. Let's meet humans where they consume. These are the stats. And this might be on the website, or this might be something I looked up, I'm not sure. But this is energy consumption broken down in the top 3 categories. So they start off with a car. Sorry, let me just get through the rest of this. They want to improve energy production to sustainable methods, right? So they're introducing like solar tiles, right? They want to reduce costs. So the Gigafactory exists to drive down battery costs so that this whole notion can be even viable, right? Because they had to start off with these sexy products that appeal to your emotion for people who could afford it, but they're very strategically moving that down the price point to where it can reach the masses. And in the meantime, working out all their kinks, getting the message out there so that the world is ready for their mass adoption product once they're ready to actually make it. Right? This is all very strategic. I mean, he literally called out the strat like 2006, I think, and then he updated it like last year or something like that. And they're doing it. And then basically he has this other company where if it all goes wrong, we can get to Mars. Okay, so he's a visionary, right? This is awesome. Execution. I'm gonna bring it back into games a little bit. If you take the opportunity, you thoroughly discuss the opportunity, and you know your audience that you want to resonate with, there's a few areas where you're going to be making a lot of decisions. I think this is kind of like the experiential thing and the concise pitch thing. What story do you want them to tell? If I'm watching a friend, how many times have you guys done this? Like, when you look over someone's shoulder, playing a new game you haven't seen before, what do you come away with? What is it, if you decide to play that game, why did you do it? Was it something exciting you saw? Was it some kind of emotional response that he or she had? If you can walk back from a deliberate statement here, then again, every one of your other decisions will kind of point at this. There's a few, this is by no means an exhaustive list, but for a lot of recent games, and for ones that maybe I know better, is the game competitive? Can I feel good when I sit down and play this game for 10 minutes or 20 hours as I've done? Can I walk away with the feeling that I just completely dominated like someone else? And more importantly, someone else that I respect. Right? Because there's no, like a lot of gamers have a bad reputation for just taking advantage of new players, but really like no one respects that, right? Like you're only respected, it's only satisfying when you beat someone who is also ranked, also respected, also a skilled player, right? In this game, can I do something that other people can't do? Right? That, to me, that's like achievement. Can that achievement be shown somehow? There are some games, there are a lot of games recently that have been really popular in the survival genres. The survival games are very high-stress games. I'm going to walk through one of them later. But in those high-stress situations, you just walk away with these stories that are not reproducible by any designer. Right? It kind of takes a soup of components. It takes a magical combination of a random number generator, and and you'll get those experiences that are really memorable, and they stand out because they're highly contrasted with all the other times that were really boring or really quiet or or uneventful. Are there relationships that I can form through this game? Not only of friends, which obviously is very powerful. We're cooperatively doing something or accomplishing something together, and we can share that experience, which will make it even more memorable. But also, again, of your rivals. A win is nice if you don't win often, but if you win all the time, it's more meaningful if you win against someone that you care about. Thematic. This is synonymous to me with style. Let's take a look at the Joker character, right? The Joker character has been rendered in probably 10 or 15 ways across the years in different medium. But these three, just to show a few examples, these renditions, if you look at the bullet point list of the Joker character, purple suit, green hair, crazy smile, kind of crazy, right? Like they're all satisfy that. But these are as different as can be in terms of the resonant response, the tone, and ultimately the character, their root motivation, right? Your read of their root motivation and why are they crazy? Why do I care about this character? Why is this character engaging? Is because you can hopefully, potentially relate to something that's motivating them. So let's say Jack Nicholson's Joker from 26 years ago. He was like the lunatic. He was just random and crazy and just a giant troll. Heath Ledger's Joker was obsessive. He wanted, he wanted to watch the world burn, and he was a menace, right? He was sadistic, right? And that's like a new edge than potentially many other renderings of Joker. And then the weakest one probably is Jared Leto's Joker is just a thug, right? Like he had these tats and he tried to act all crazy and he method acted and drove all the other actors crazy. But he, at the end of the day, was one-dimensional. He was just a thug. He was brutish and thuggish and unsophisticated, right? Gameplay mechanics, this is like, each one of these things is like their own lecture. And actually, I was just telling Tom earlier, this was part of CS248 where he followed with like a deeper dive into each one of these things. So hopefully somebody goes into these things after. But there's a lot of choices you can make. A lot of these that I listed up here are related to, well, I guess moment-to-moment decision making. These are the tools that you give to the player that help them solve a puzzle, an endless puzzle. And their ability to execute is what makes it endless. They know what they're supposed to do in many cases, and in some cases that's a large part of the game, just even figuring out what to do. But let's say you even know what to do, being able to do it is really hard. Just like making a game, right? Like you're about to find this out. Like you can have all the best ideas in the world and be sound there, and having good ideas and having a good solid thesis is a foundation so that you don't waste ultimately your whole quarter's worth of time. But once you have that great idea, you actually need to execute really well. And so it's really similar with the players. Like they're just trying to execute against this puzzle that you've put in front of them, and if it's challenging and if they don't have obstacles that appear arbitrary, and if they're not fighting, these are more tools than things that they have to fight for fruitless reasons, then they'll be satisfied and they'll be engaged and they'll be increasing in mastery, and then they'll be able to, then it turns into a game. Feedback. So feedback is an important concept to keep in mind too. Remember that this is an interactive medium. This is not a movie that's one way. This is two-way, which means that the player's talking to you through your controls, you're talking to them through the visuals you're putting in front of them, and the indicators. These are basically indicators that you're giving them to tell them that they're on or off the right track. Okay, so I'm going to walk through a bunch of examples to kind of illustrate some things. And these examples that I've chosen are there's so many examples that I could have picked, but these ones I picked because they were made with small teams. I had no idea when I was sitting in the classroom, and even for years after, what it took to make a game. I don't know if there was 5 people, 10 people, 80 people, 300 people. I had no idea. And games can be made in any of that amount of spectrum. These games I picked because they should show you that you can make amazing games with a small group of people if you make very good decisions. That's a big fat if. So Agar.io. Okay, so I'm glad that many of you recognize Agar.io. And I'll show a little video for those of you who don't. This game to me is the most beautiful, distilled show of multiplayer. It has co-op in it, it has PvP in it, and really there's like 3 mechanics in there. It's ball move to mouse, ball split up, bigger ball eats smaller ball. Like that's it, right? It's the most distilled small thing you can get to and has all the highs and lows of StarCraft. It's crazy, right? It can get there. This was developed by a 19-year-old Brazilian. I think he did it in 1 week, okay? By the end of 6 months, he was pulling in 100 to 500K every month. I'll just show the video real quick. All you're trying to do is get up on that leaderboard, and the leaderboard is measured by how big you are. Look at the drama, right? He almost died right here. I know, right? What happens? All right. Portal. So Portal was developed with about 25 developers at Valve, and Valve's developers are super OP. So, but it started out with a much smaller team. So for any of you who aren't familiar with Portal, it's got a bunch of mechanics, but it's got a primary mechanic, which is I can put up a portal where I can put up an entrance and an exit. And if I go into the entrance, I can, first of all, see in it and see where I'm going to go. But I carry my momentum when I go through that. So if I'm flying through there, I'm going to pop out with that vector of velocity. They added on top of that, they're like, that mechanic in and of itself was interesting. But they're like, hey, we have this cool thing. What do we do with it? They turned it into a puzzle game. So each level is its own discrete puzzle. And on top of that, they layered some really dystopian kind of like witty humor, right? And as a product, it's something really fresh, something that no one really expected at the time. But it started out as this. This is an orbicular drop made by a handful of DigiPen students in 2005, which they started the Portal tech or the Portal idea, and then they were absorbed into Valve, and then they were part of the Portal team eventually. But you can do this kind of thing in school, and you might end up working at Valve, or Riot, or Blizzard. For any of you who aren't familiar, I'll just show you one level from this.
Let's see what the next test is. Advanced aerial faith plates. Well, have fun soaring through the air without a care in the world. I have to move the wing that was made entirely of glass and pick up 15 acres of broken glass. Fly myself.
It's got really basic physics. So now I have to figure out how to open the door.
Oh, sorry. I'm still cleaning out the test chambers, so sometimes there's still traction, standing around, smelling and being useless. Try to avoid the garbage hurtling towards you.
You move this entrance portal.
standing around being useless? That was a metaphor. I was actually talking about you. And I'm sorry. You.
So it took an otherwise like, a 3D puzzle, and then they just added some personality and some humor to it, and then suddenly it's like, it's awesome, right? This game came out last year. It's a game called Inside. It's a beautiful game. This game opened my eyes to how you can tell a story without saying a single word. And it was made with about 30 devs. And again, it's just a masterpiece. It's like really, really beautifully done. I'm going to show you the first few minutes. It's a little long. I might cut it short, but you can kind of see. There's, I think, two mechanics really. You can move forward, you can move backward, and you can jump. I think that's it. Maybe there's a drop if you're hanging, I think. But it's dead simple gameplay-wise. But they do a ton with that. Again, no words, but they really use audio, which I should actually show you. This is another example of how if you keep things really clean, really distilled, you can really grab people's attention. The baseline here is really flat and low. The volume is really low. So when something happens, you super pay attention. They don't need any fancy graphics. They do have a little bit of lighting and shadows here, but they're not trying to wow you over. Yet, with the simple tools they have, they create such an amazing atmosphere. And then how they put this together and how they tuned it so carefully, you really feel like you're sneaking around. And again, back to that emotional response that you're evoking. I lied. One more mechanic. Now in here, you can tell the thousands of decisions that are happening. Like, how does the system know what animation to play? Like, those are all very deliberate and careful choices made by the developers. He's not pushing any kind of slide button there. The developers know you're on a hill, play slide animation. The player's just holding down like right key. In that particular example, there was literally zero skill involved. He was just holding down right key. They timed the spawn of that dog perfectly so that you just barely miss you, again, to evoke that emotional response. And then they start escalating. And as you also notice, there's a lot of subtle choices here. The baseline of everything is gray. So if you see color anywhere, you see light anywhere, you can't help yourself but to look. But finally, the player did decide something there, which is just to go left. There was no skill involved in that other than just, recognizing that he was about to get caught. Who shoots at kids, right? It's messed up. was 4.5 minutes. I don't know if it felt like that, but you know, it's like you're on there. I don't know, you're pretty on edge the whole time. As Professor James mentioned earlier, Stardew Valley. Who's played this? Okay, awesome. So Stardew Valley was made by one guy who couldn't get a job in the game industry. He couldn't get a job in the game industry because he basically had nothing to show, nothing to go on. You guys, after this project, will have something to show. But so he's like, oh, what do? I might as well work on something so I could learn. And so he starts doing that. So he learns everything he needs to learn. Coding. He did all art himself. I think he did all audio too. He did everything, I think. Sold 2.5 million copies as of earlier this year, $15 a piece. So he did pretty well. And he deserved it. I mean, he hit something that initially appeared niche, right? But people could simplify the lack of need for Stardew Valley to be like, oh, like Harvest Moon's kind of dead, and Harvest Moon's only sold like 300,000 copies each, and is that worth the dev team of blah, 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 right? But what's not old, if you distill it even further, is collection. People like to collect. There's a form of progression that isn't just like elite skills. There's also just collecting stuff, right? And seeing your town go from a mess to not a mess, and then to beautiful, right? And that's kind of at the heart of this game. Okay, so I wouldn't have a legitimate talk here if I didn't go into PUBG. I played about 400 hours of PUBG in the first 2 months that it was out. PlayerUnknown's Battlegrounds is worth noting for a few reasons. This was last night. They peaked at 1.5 million concurrent, which I believe is Steam's all-time high. The only thing that came close was Dota 2, I think, during its finals, and they give prizes for people watching through their client. So it's like, this is not any of that. This is real people playing, right? This is like unparalleled. No one's done this. The thing that, you know, within the company, we're like, dude, PUBG, like what the heck, right? I also played King of the Kill, and I can't yet explain, and this is worth its own case study. I can't explain why or how PUBG is 15 times the concurrency of King of the Kill. This thing didn't kill King of the Kill. Like, King of the Kill still has its basically same 100,000 players that it had before PUBG came out, but no one knew that it could be this big, right? And I had a chance to talk with the guys who started it. They did a Hail Mary. These guys came from the team that made Terra the MMO. This company was entirely built to make that MMO. So they pitched something. They were like, hey, let's make this like, let's make Battle Royale. And they're like, what? What's that? You mean that little like niche little mod that some kids like to play that I see a little bit on Twitch? They're like, yeah, that one. And so they're like, maybe. And they couldn't convince the publishing leads. So they managed to get, I forget his name, I think it's Brandon Green, PlayerUnknown, the guy who's made this since it was a mod at Arma. And that really kind of inflected their support within Bluehole, the publisher. So then they had like, okay, so you get 30 devs and 10 months. That's it, right? And then we're gonna pull it. We're gonna pull the plug. So they did that. Now it's been, I think, about 5-6 months since they've launched, and they're now 80 devs, and they're doing tremendously well. For any of you who don't know what this is Hunger Games. If you're unfamiliar with that, the concept is really simple. There's 100 players that are in a plane, and they're flying over an island. Every single player, even if whether or not they're grouped, can decide when they jump out of the plane. And this plane is going to go in a random direction across the island. And once they land, they have nothing. They don't have any armor, they don't have any guns, they don't have any knives, they have nothing. Their goal is to survive, to be the last one alive. That's it. Oh, there's one more thing. To kind of force the action, there's like a death circle that keeps narrowing on a random point on the island. So you don't know where it's going to land. The map is the same every single time, but the circle is what randomizes it and what changes the landscape of, are we fighting in a city at the end? Are we fighting in a in a vast open field? Are there hills in our area? Are there bushes I can hide in? That's what kind of changes the experience from match to match. I'll go into this a little bit more after I show the video. So just a little forewarning, there's some cussing in this. There's no way to play this game without cussing, in my opinion. This is a video of mine. This is me, and let's leave it a little ambiguous. One of the CEOs of Riot, and then and a few other guys. And this kind of shows the highs and lows of this game and some of what makes it really exciting.
The next circle, we had an awesome open field, but so did they. So class type, Thomas type. And we're going to
So the blue circle, beyond the blue circle is death. The white circle is where the next circle is going to be. We have to get to that white circle, but there's an open field between us. And there's 9 people alive, including the 3 of us. We have no idea where the other guys are. They could be hiding in those little bushes over there. It could look like a rock. Like, it's really scary.
The sound is in Spectator.
This is when they still had the bug where audio was from the wrong direction in Spectator.
Okay, Joe and Thomas, there's a rock ahead of us. Okay, there's a bunch of guys inside that house. I might run up on it. I'm gonna run right up on it. I don't have any.
I was desperate. I had like really crappy gear at this point. There was not a whole lot I could do from afar, so I was like, F it, I'm going in. And I'm just like, please, 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 please. Like, just, no one shot me, just luckily.
Only full bullets, only 4 bullets. Fucking hell.
So thankfully, one of my partners ran up with me, and there's 2 other guys who stayed back to snipe and watch, but they got caught in the circle. So we're 3 out of 4 right now. One of our guys is dying.
No, I think the last 2 guys are in that direction. So we're okay. Okay.
Dude, what if you should bait him with the car?
I can do that.
These harebrained ideas, and actually do that. I'm like desperate for ammo. My guns are crappy. I'm just like.
I need 5.56.
For all we know, the guy could be watching us through a window right now.
Oh, we have 5.56. Okay, I'm good. Hey, look out the window. Okay, we got a in here. Any idea where he is? Let's see. Rocks. I'm gonna try to go for the car, okay? I'm gonna go back around the house. I'll distract Joe if you can.
Yeah, the car's gonna take fire.
He's in the middle.
He's right here. That little thing that could be a rock or a bush or whatever, like that's him.
In the middle of the field. We have 1 second before the thing closes on us.
My friend's running up. He gets downed. I'm like, see you, nerd. So my plan is to run him over, but this thing had like a wheel shot out, so I couldn't turn. I jump out. I almost die. We're like dying because no one one expected us to live because our gear was super crappy. Okay, so what are we seeing there? Look at the outcomes due to the various features they put in, and I'll go into features in a second. But these are the outcomes that I think make this experience really stand out. So super high pressure situation makes the player choices feel really consequential. Everything I decide, do I go in or do I stay? Do I hide behind a rock or do I fight out and shoot in the open? All those have dire consequences, whether I live or survive. Like I took a chance to run at that house, and I obviously should have died there because there was 5 other players doing God knows what, like who weren't shooting me. But I took that risk, and then those guys inside the house thought they were totally safe. And they were just like not even checking the windows because they were like, oh, whatever, no one's gonna run up, nobody's be dumb enough to run up this house, right? So then I was rewarded for that, right? And that was such a high moment because that wasn't supposed to happen. And so it was really rewarding. So you have these like dead times, right? We were crawling around for like 3 minutes to have like 30 seconds of action, right? And most of the game is like basically 20 minutes of dead time to have like these little 1 minute like, spikes, but the spikes are very high. They're also really memorable because then people remember these crazy things that happened. And again, you can't get this in another game. I mean, technically you can get a lot of it in King of the Kill, but for example, a gigantic difference between King of the Kill and PlayerUnknown Battlegrounds is King of the Kill reads as more of an action game than a tactical one. It's faster paced. An example, a feature, a design decision they made that makes it feel like that is when you jump out of a car in King of the Kill, you take 0 damage. So what happens is, let's say you are just driving around over a field and you see a squad just running in the open field. You can just basically circle strafe them, basically each guy jumps out and you'll have like 4 different angles on them and you'll have a humongous advantage. In PUBG, you are fighting physics. You will take damage if you jump out of a moving car. That car that I jumped out of was going like, 5-7 miles an hour, and I took 70% of my health and damage. And I could have died just right there, right? And it would have been over. It would have been not this video that I showed you today. But instead, I had that, I barely lived. And then he was looking at me, and I was looking at him, and he's like, what the heck, he survived? And then we start shooting, and I just happened to shoot first, and then, and so I won. But a lot of that adds up to like mind games, right? Every player has these same limitations to deal with. And that creates opportunity for me to try to figure out what is the squad that I know is in this house? What are they trying to do? What would I do next if I was in that house? And if I can figure that out, I can figure out where they're going to be. And if I don't know where they're going to be, I can get the jump on them, right? So all these things are very consequential decisions based off of super simple mechanics. And then on top of all that, like let's say it all fails and a lot of people die within the first few minutes, you can just restart and just go right in. So you can get these really high stakes experiences, high intensity experiences, but not like have invested like 10 hours into it and felt like you wasted all your time. Feature-wise, I think there's a bunch of really good decisions they made. So they could have gone with any kind of thematic or art style, but decided to go with semi-realistic. And it's not about realism the way Arma is. Arma is kind of the root of all these. And if you don't know what Arma is, go and look it up. But it's like ridiculous. It's like if you get shot in the leg, you have to like, your leg is broken. So you are limping then or crawling then. It's like just, it's not, someone over there got too crazy. So like they just, it's no fun basically to deal with that kind of a constraint. But one thing that's awesome here is that you know what a gun does. You know what a handgun does. You know what a car should do. And so that just shortcuts you into the action right away. And again, this was a deliberate decision on their part. Oops, sorry. Gun feel is also really good in this game. So in a lot of other games, guns can feel like lasers, and so there's no gameplay to it. Like Call of Duty, I use as an example of having devolved in gunplay over the past decade. Maybe it's because they had to deal with the analog stick or something like that. They basically took out recoil out of guns. So guns are one less thing that you can master, that you can feel good about mastering. But these guns feel pretty good. You have to kind of fight them. You have to decide how much to shoot. You can't just like spray and pray. There's a lot of decisions in there that make it really gratifying to players. The randomness of the items really make the each game feel really different. Again, that game was extra exciting because we were not supposed to win that. Like, our gear was super terrible leading up to that point, and that kind of that low really made a lot of room for high. Things are obfuscated from you, so obviously the choice of the perspective, and they loosened this a little bit by picking a third-person camera instead of first-person camera. First-person camera, which they've now implemented, is super constraining, and so it's basically even more scary because you really can't see 270 degrees around you. So a guy could be right there if you're not careful and if you're not just paying attention to sounds, and so it makes it that much more mysterious, and you have to be more calculating. The circle, again, really simple mechanic. Who knows what that blue electric field is? Who cares? It's just the thing that forces you into, force the action. If they didn't have a circle, people would be spread out kind of everywhere, and the game could last like 7 hours. Again, they really use physics here. Okay, they really use physics here, and to their advantage. And most of this isn't about producing realism. They leverage physics here to make things familiar and make things intuitive, make actions intuitive. And same thing with the audio. They put in like attenuation, occlusion, all these technical features that in another game would make 0 sense. In this game, it helps you to judge where my threats are and therefore what I should do about it as a player. And that's it.